Hi, everyone. I'm Captain Nguyen. I'm an active duty service member based out of Joint Base Lewis McChord. I'm currently a sitting company commander out here. Along with my military service here, I'm also a father. I'm a father of three. I have three kids, two boys, one girl, 11, 7, and 4. I'm also a husband. And I was asked to come on here for our Salute to Service webinar here to kind of talk about service and what it means to be able to serve in all the different ways that we can serve. But first and foremost, I want to explain and discuss, why I've chosen to serve, especially through this outfit, through the military service here. See, I'm a Vietnamese American. So in the culture of my upbringing household, there's really a strong understanding that the young and able will struggle and sacrifice to provide for like the youth and elderly, and it's through these endeavors that I understood my place within my family and my social dynamic. What I mean by that is I just really wanted to inspire people to serve through the sharing of my story. Now, I face a multitude of challenges that are not solely unique to myself. However, I know is a form of struggle for many first-generation Americans or first-generation Vietnamese or immigrants. I lived in a single mother household or single parent household. My mother made an average of $800 a month, and we paid rent, which was about $500 where we were living at the time. The apartment had no furniture or anything really in it other than a single twin bed and some plastic chairs for dining. My mother and I shared that single twin bed for quite some time, and I distinctly remember folding blankets multiple times to lay out in the living room just so we can have a softer area to sit. Cable TV was an extreme luxury, and I spent many holidays and birthdays receiving nothing. And I think that resonates with some of the audience that we talked to. Ultimately, I overcame these adversities by focusing and occupying myself in other areas of education and work, doing well in primary and secondary school, especially with my background ethnicity. We teach that's a quick way to help lift you out of this socioeconomic class. And it's important. I think that's why our democracy enables us to do that, especially in the United States here. Anyways, all these acts I did as a youth leading up to the point where I made a decision to serve selflessly, whether that's through military service, community service, and et cetera. I found all my acts to be self-serving until that moment I had it. And when I was 18, right after graduating high school, I found myself in a state of depression where I was not committed to any purpose. And I realized I found meaningful existence when I started volunteering within the community and deciding to join armed services. And it was a reflection on some school teachers and mentors and even the after school Big Brother programs that we had in our area that helped me. People want to share and help. I saw a lot of good in the people of the community, and there are many ways to serve, whether that's through community service, social service, or armed services. I'm thankful daily for these selfless individuals that cared enough to give back and invest in me. And I'm just excited to sit here today and be on the side where I feel like I can provide, my own unique experience to the rest of the group here. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ty. That was very, very impressive and very and very made us think very deeply. Both what you and Christine have already shared. Kimmy, please go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me today. My name is Kimberly Curry, and I live in Spokane, Washington, with my husband and our 4 children, ranging from ages 16 to 7. Like they said, I am a graduate student in the International Affairs and Leadership program at ASU and a fellow with ASU's Global Human Rights Hub. Until recently, I stayed at home with my children for the last 15 years until my youngest started school, at which point I took a job in refugee resettlement with the International Rescue Committee. I would love to be able to say that I have taken an interest in service for as long as I can remember, But that is actually not the case, because for a large portion of my life, I was actually the recipient of the goodness and kindness and service of others. I had a really unstable childhood and upbringing, and bounced around from different relatives to a group home and eventually to no home. So as I finished high school, there were many, many people who mentored me, let me stay with them until I could save enough money for an apartment, invited me over on holidays when I had no place to go, and took an interest in encouraging me to go to college. Um, in 2004, I enrolled as a first generation college student at ASU and eventually earned a degree in family and human development, in hopes of acquiring the knowledge and skills to break the cycle of generational trauma. That degree helped me learn how to cultivate functioning family systems. And during that time, I got married to my best friend, Rob, and we both graduated college and began a family of our own. And so it was at that point that having stability in my life gave me the desire to widen my focus to include an awareness and a concern for others who were outside of my family, because I remembered what a difference that made for me when others did that same thing. So as I learned of civil unrest and famine and persecution of individuals in places like Myanmar, Sudan, and Syria, my eyes were really open to issues that seemed beyond my comprehension. But even though my worldview was growing bigger, I felt much smaller and more helpless than ever to try to make a difference. As a stay-at-home mom with young children, I didn't have a lot of resources or knowledge on what to do to help, but I wanted to try. So I began researching refugee organizations in my area, in an attempt to find a way for my children and I to be helpful. So we started with a donation drive that led to teaching English to newly immigrated families while my kids would play with their kids and we would do our lessons. After that, it led to helping refugees learn how to drive, which was a big mistake on my end because I'm a terrible driver and they already were much better than me. I kind of shifted into other things like helping find jobs, building friendships, sharing experiences, and things like that. And that eventually resulted in my family becoming a host family through World Relief, where we would have refugees move into our home to live with us temporarily until they could obtain permanent housing. And then eventually that led to us participating in a program to provide foster care to unaccompanied refugee minors. So overall, we've had the privilege of sharing our home with 28 refugees from places like Syria, Jordan, and the Congo. But we truthfully had no idea how the people that we were attempting to serve would actually be the ones making our lives better. I learned from every one of them that we are all connected to everyone everywhere, and that language and distance and culture are not barriers to that connection, but actually building blocks to developing a more meaningful bond with people. Um, um, just briefly, I'll share a story. My 5-year-old was, I'll never forget, he's 12 now, but when he was 5, he would follow our Syrian friend who was staying with us outside into the backyard when he would go to smoke. And I would watch out the window as my son Winston would ride his tricycle back and forth, talking his ear off in English. And our Syrian friend, who didn't understand any English at all, would respond back in Arabic. And so the two of them would laugh and talk and not know what the other one was saying. And it was just such a great experience to me to see that we don't need communication to make bonds and friendships. There were just so many different times when people staying with us would make a heart with their hand because we couldn't communicate, or we would use Google Translate to ask if they had friends in the United States, and they would immediately point to us, accepting us as their people without knowing anything about us. So I just have too many stories to share, and I don't have enough time, but I just would, if I could share one thing today, it would be that we really do benefit from service and from reaching out to others who may be different than us, who we may not relate to at first, but in the end, service might help others, but it will really heal us, and we'll be the ones who are having the difference made in our life through those efforts. And like was already said, I just want to echo that it doesn't need to be a grand gesture. It can be using the time and talents and capacity that you have in whatever way that you are able, and it really will make a difference to someone.
Well, thank you very much, Kimmy. That was all three of your very powerful presentations of the motivations as to why you serve, and each in a very individual way and very moving way. So we very much appreciate the introduction. General, over to you, sir.
Well, thank you all for those compelling opening statements and your introductions. Good day, everyone. I'm Lieutenant General retired Ben Frakley, retired from the Army, but not retired from anything else, thanks in part to the three of them on the screen, and in particular, Christine Moore, who keeps me busy. But I served in the U.S. Army for almost 37 years, from the rank of second lieutenant to lieutenant general, and have been serving at ASU for 10 years, trying to impart leadership knowledge to others. And besides that, do some volunteer work, sit on boards, to try to continue to serve. I would just say that today's panel is about why we serve, and I'll just mention my own statement for just one moment. As a young child, having a father who and mother who survived the Depression, and a father who served in the Second World War as an infantry private to battlefield commissioned lieutenant, he would often say at the dinner table, even before John Kennedy said it in his inaugural address, my father would say, "What have you done for the good of your country today?" And inspired all of us, there's four of us, to do something to help others. So I remember as a young child through my parents serving, and that inspiration to continue to serve as my life went on. So it's that parental influence, like others have said, and quite frankly are doing with their own children, our panelists, that influenced me to try to serve. Over to you, Mr. Ambassador, before we ask questions.
Thank you very much, General. My name is Mike Polt. I am ASU's ambassador in residence. I come to the ASU family over the last 10 years from after 35 years of serving in our country's diplomatic service all around the world. And as you can hear from my accent, I sort of connect on to Ty's story. I'm a zero-generation American. I am an immigrant. I came here as a 14-year-old kid from a very comfortable, I would even say privileged middle-class family. My Austrian parents were divorced. My mother remarried an American diplomat in Austria, the country I come from, and came to this country when I was, as I said, 14 years old. And for me, service has always been connected to my adopted new home, the United States. I have a very emotional attachment to our country, and one that in which the concept of service to the country was something that I felt was sort of something I owed for the incredible reception I received coming to this place, and for people accepting me to be an American, even though I sound like I come from someplace else. And I can't imagine too many places around the world where it is possible for someone like me to go ahead and be out, to go back out to the world and say, I am representing the United States of America, which makes us pretty unique. And I hope part of what we can discuss today is some of the challenges we face as a very polarized society, in which all of you are talking about service, and the General and I have been living a life of public service, in which maybe this is one of the potential tools we have at our disposal to heal our society, to bring us back together again. And so in that context, it certainly has been a privilege for me to serve America and to serve our fellow citizens in this context. But I am amazed with the three stories I've heard from Christine, from Ty, and from Kimmy already. And General and I have known each other for quite a while now, so I know his story. and he mine. So look forward to having the conversation and posing questions, and then later getting to the audience. So back to you, General.
So sort of the first question I would ask is comes from an actually inspirational story from Arthur Ashe, a renowned tennis player, African-American, who became a phenomenal philanthropist, overcame a lot of prejudice. You can imagine an early Black man trying to play tennis in a white world was not easy. But after he was an exceptional athlete, he took his earnings and he became an exceptional philanthropist and servant. And he is quoted with saying, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can in service. How does that resonate with you all? Christine, please, what do you think?
Just yesterday, we were talking with my 16-year-old about ways that he could volunteer at school, because his school particularly has a volunteer requirement. And I said we could collect, he was focusing on a homeless encampment downtown and it's close to his school. I said we could collect toiletries, we could make cupcakes for Halloween, we could go do these things. And he said, no, I want to get into the laws. I want to work with the police department. And he had these very grand ideas that just melted my heart. But I was also worried that he was overlooking the very small things that he could do tomorrow to make a difference to someone who hasn't had a cupcake in months and months or years, or who just needed some shampoo or some fresh socks. And that quote is really hits home for me. And I love that so many people have great aspirations to do great things, but sometimes the greatest impact is in the smallest gestures.
Thank you. Others?
I'd like to say I am working with the International Rescue Committee. We see examples every single day of people who come in who just want to help, and sometimes they don't even know how, and they say, I'm here, I will do whatever you tell me. And being a nonprofit with a small staff and not a lot of resources, it is so meaningful to us and also to the refugees that we serve, to have people who are willing to welcome them, to befriend them. One of the things that comes to mind is bus training. We have these young girls who come in, and the refugees who move here need to learn how to ride the bus. And these girls didn't know how to ride the bus themselves. They're in college, but we told them, hey, that's what we need right now, is we need someone to teach these people how to ride the bus, and we have no one to do it. And so they practiced riding the bus themselves. They studied maps. They learned how to get around the city on routes, and they have been bus training these families for the last 7 months, twice a week. And so it just shows that you don't need money to serve. You don't even need a huge amount of time. You just need willingness, and you don't even need the idea. Just start with the willingness, and it'll happen from there.
Wonderful, thank you. Ty, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Sir and team, I think it's really important that you're talking about serving now at the capacity that you can with whatever you can. And where I see that being important is that it encourages, the responsibility and provides for a meaningful existence, whether you're a young age or, as you develop and become an adult. I would argue that selfless service echoes beyond any human being's lifespan. And with that, specifically for our government, our democracy here, it's more likely to promote economic development, protect citizens, uphold human rights and worker rights, and avoid humanitarian crises and refugee crisis, like similar to the ones that my ancestors kind of dealt with. And I think we can do a lot of these things through volunteering at the local community here. There's a lot of small things that kids and young adults, or even older adults, can do, and that's to go to school board meetings, maybe hospitals, food banks, groups, or any local event and ask around. And nowadays, where we're more connected than ever, you don't have to physically be at the locations too. Maybe you can volunteer through any online means or whatnot. It's just your time and the effort. The authenticity of that is what really matters. and the community and people will see that.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Well said by all of you. And it is amazing to me how small things can roll up and be huge things. Christine said earlier that, you know, there's a lot of expectations because of social media, because of immediate feedback, because we're in a cluttered environment where we're bombarded by information all the time. And I think sometimes a barrier to service is thinking you have to have all these things in place, 1,000 volunteers, millions of dollars, a transportation system, and on and on. And yet I reflect on Dr. Martin Luther King brought 250,000 people to Washington, D.C. to hear the I Have a Dream speech. It was really a march for jobs and economic equality, but he did it through volunteerism. Bus drivers and bus companies donated their time. Churches gave their church for people to sleep in. Families made meals. There weren't McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, or any fast food you want to name in the 1960s. They packed lunches on the buses and got them there. A whole movement by small things to get $250,000 to be in that impactful moment. So a lot can be done with a little. So, Ty, you were talking about that our society and should encourage people to serve. And so my question is, in a democracy, in our democracy, does it encourage service? And if you take a position, why? And should it? How does a democracy play into this? Ty, why don't you lead that off?
Again, sir, thank you for the question, and team. Absolutely. I think democracies are more likely to promote service. You know, a democracy is all for economic development, the protection of citizens, like we talked about, right? Upholding the rights of people and ensuring that we don't have some type of humanitarian crisis. And you can see that a lot in some of the policies that we have inside of our government. I think it's very important that an organization or a nation where we emphasize democracy, we are able to do this through electing specific leaders that have these programs and services for these values and principles. And a lot of us, being people that are capable, can volunteer to those services or programs, such as, you know, maybe a community watch, helping protect citizens, or through law enforcement, or the armed services in itself. And then you can see through volunteering for humanitarian crises going forward and assisting, you know, other nations. A democracy enables that a lot, because usually when you deal with the socialist side, you don't have a lot of mobility, upward mobility. So you're really focusing a lot on just taking care of yourself and your family, right? Survivability becomes kind of more of the means versus here, where you have a collective group of folks working for, you know, a collective achievement together and providing for each other. It gives you the ability to focus on the social economic development of the organization or the nation.
Other thoughts on, does our democracy encourage service?
Christine?
Well, I would say that's a bit out of my wheelhouse, but at the same time, you know, and I might have to reflect on my thought that the answer isn't always yes. I feel like just our society and the way that the media and the world is communicated again to our children. That's the perspective I'm taking today. Is that they often don't see the benefits of serving, whether it be locally, nationally, or internationally. They often have to search for, and we've talked about this before, they often have to search for those types of media stories or inspiration, and intentionally search for those things because they're probably not watching programs anymore that have commercials or news stories built into them or life lessons built into them. And so they're not, these ideas of serving are not always promoted to them. And that's probably more of a reflection on society and not necessarily the way that our laws or our government are set up, but it's still something that our children are missing in the everyday messages that they're receiving.
Yeah, thank you both for that. And I would just say that I think first of all, I believe our democracy does encourage service because we've seen the example from the founding fathers and mothers. Don't forget Abigail Adams and her influence on the country, who gave their all. And quite frankly, some of them lost everything they had to create what we have as a country. And we have seen in our history since where women and men have stood up to serve and made a difference in taking a stand. Former slaves, oppressed parts of our country who have stood up and served. And I think we have an obligation as citizens to serve. It's our duty. We have this freedom which we enjoy. We have these opportunities which you all have discussed about as first generations and what you're doing with your own families. And I personally believe it's incumbent upon us as we serve, as Christine has indicated with her family, to pass this on, this sense of service to others, and that we live in this unbelievable country and we should give back. Mr. Ambassador.
I really think this is a great area to explore a little bit further. And I'd like to sharpen it a little bit more. And maybe Kimmy, you can be the one to lead us off on the sharpening part, because I agree with everything you guys have said and what the general just said about the fact that service is baked into this republic. I'm with you. At the same time, we are a country that highlights individual taking care of yourself. That you're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Doing things for yourself. Don't wait for the government to provide. Be self-sufficient. So our service culture, I think, is very much one of voluntary service, which is what all of you are describing. So people give freely of themselves for each other, not because the system tells you that's what you must do. Even though the general is totally right when he talks about feeling a certain sense of patriotic duty to serve each other, but it comes out of a voluntary commitment to that. But I wonder whether, Kimmy, you would say a few things, and then the others, of course, as well, about are there any contradictions in our individualism in relation to the service culture that the general was just mentioning?
Well, I was thinking as everyone was talking, one of the beautiful things about democracy and service and how they go hand in hand is that we have the values laid out for us to guide us, the values of and principles of freedom and justice and service, and everyone has the right to pursue happiness and not be discriminated against. And so the great thing about democracy is that if it's not functioning, as you gave examples of times in the past, then we can serve and use our volunteerism and use our collective efforts to be able to correct those times in history, or to move forward in a better way. And so I think that's where we as individuals come in. And I don't know that it's necessarily a contradiction. I think it's actually exciting that we as individuals have so much power to be able to live in a democratic society where we can correct mistakes, or we can move forward with hope, with a better way of doing things. And we can do it as individuals and also collectively as a group to make life better for everyone.
I think that's terrific. Ty, you want to add anything onto that? Do you see any contradictions? Because you and I sort of a little bit view this from, you are first generation, a zero generation American in my case. Do you see any contradiction in the philosophy of individual independence and service at the same time?
Sir, I don't see a contradiction. I think it's just a little different with me here. One thing that I failed to mention to the audience here is that I talked about being a first generation, but really I came here as a young adolescent with my mother, right? So for everyone's awareness here, I actually grew up in a refugee camp. It's out in Bidong camp. It's out in Kuala Lumpur. I'm Vietnamese, and we left Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, in Bidang camp in '96 and came to the United States, to Utah. Utah is where my uncle, who was an Air Force pilot, was stationed out there. And that's what brought our family to Utah here. See, I'm on the opposite spectrum where I actually believe my personal obligations are tied in with the ability to serve the community because of what transpired at the younger ages, where I understand that I wouldn't have or be afforded the luxuries that I do now. And by luxuries, we have different perspectives of that. Like luxury to me is, I can go to the grocery store and I can pick the food that I'm going to eat tonight. And that is, here for a lot of our, for our nation here, that can be seen as, a form of entertainment. People are deciding what they want to eat, what they want to do. But I know it's not like that for 70 or 80% of the rest of the world. And from that perspective is how I remember now that I have this conviction that I would not be here today without those who served previously. And I imagine, with the 55 years that it's been since the Vietnam War, roughly about, just imagine this, how many lives, families, fathers, sons, cousins and uncles that served and gave up those hours, days, months, and years of their lives and struggles to give someone like me the opportunities that I have now. And for that, I feel like I'm unworthy without repaid services. So that's just my opinion on it, sir. I know it's unique to this, but not unique to, a lot of immigrants or first generation or zero generation folks. They understand that.
That's a great way to describe it. And when you use the word unworthy of not serving, in other words, is a very powerful statement. Thank you very much. Christine, you've moved around the world with your military family, right? You've been in other parts of the world. Maybe you could say a few words about service culture here and service culture that you've observed in other parts of the world that you have experienced, and compare them. Well, how did you see service exercised or not in other places where you have been?
Well, we've been in Hawaii and Korea, and most recently Germany. And I would say our connection to the community in terms of service was strongest while we were in Germany. The American community and the German community, particularly around the bases, made an absolute effort to get together children's groups and school groups and church groups and scout groups to work together on different types of projects, both inside the American military community, but also in the local community. And it was very much a showing of outreach and friendship and working through those acts of service and those service events with the children to kind of lay a groundwork, again, not only with service, but with partnerships with other countries. And so we've had very good experiences wherever we've lived, actually.
Is cross-cultural service engagement, like Kimmy's talking about the wonderful story about your son with the Syrian gentleman, the two of them speaking not of each other's languages, but communicating perfectly with each other, and you enjoying that interaction between the two of them. We often talk about music or art being a cross-cultural connector. Is service a cross-cultural connector? Do people respond to that? I mean, Ty is talking about it from his background. I can talk about it from mine. Christine just mentioned the German culture, and of course, Kimmy, you talked about it from the people that you've worked with and helped. Is service a cross-cultural connector? Anybody? Any one of you? Kimmy?
I think it's the best cross-cultural connector. Just the best connector in general. I feel like it teaches us to first see the humanity in people above all else, to be able to see that we're people, we're the same, we have the same aspirations, the same desires, safety, freedom, happiness for our families. And I think that just overcomes any other difference, whether it's cultural, political, just anything. It can be overcome by seeing the humanity in others, realizing that we all belong to each other, and I just think the best way to go about realizing that is through service.
Team, yes, sir, thank you. I agree. I actually believe that service through cross cultures in the international community here is it speaks volumes. You know, I want to attest to maybe a couple experiences that I had recently within the past 2 years here. One in Japan and the other in Thailand. Right, in Japan, what myself and my organization did was we volunteered for a it's a little shelter, or not quite a shelter, but it's more so of a kids. I'm sorry that it's slipping my mind here, but it's where kids go and, you know, their parents were not able to take care of them. An orphanage, I'm sorry, an orphanage. And over there, you know, they needed some service, physical labor and work to kind of clean out the areas and build up some of the brick and mortar areas, and kind of communicate with the kids, take them on some sports, and just kind of be like a bigger brother or a mentor to them for a while. And I could see that after that effect in Japan of myself and the organization doing that, it bridged the gap where you could tell that there was good, genuine trust built between the two organizations, because we're sharing the same values here. The same thing we did here in Thailand. We went and volunteered for another orphanage and school. We assisted with picking up and moving a lot of sandbags by the school that was kind of flooding. And that in itself, I think, you know, when you're doing these types of services, it empowers people to perform their best. You know, so service beyond yourself, there's a accountability aspect that's incorporated with that. And I think when folks, the community, the international community, can see that you're doing something selflessly because you understand that your values are associated with theirs, you can speak to each other without speaking the same language, because you share the same you know, accountability aspect and ethics and morals there. And I think that's how you can kind of bridge a lot of the trust and gap between that culture piece without being able to communicate directly, sir.
You know, you talk, Ty, you use the word that the general has taught all of us who've been working together in our lab on leadership development, the word trust. And trust is such a powerful emotion, and such a powerful feeling, and such a powerful motivator for common action. You know, we talk about the essence of leadership is trust. People follow people whom they trust. I think in the service area, I think what you just said equally applies. That trust relationship is what makes it possible for people to reach across various lines of division, be they cultural, be they economic, be they political, whatever they may be, and go ahead and establish a commonality that in the end result also, and you all have been so generous with your descriptions about how you have engaged in service, in the end result, something that I think is also very important to many of us, that being of service to somebody else makes you feel good. I mean, why do we give gifts? Why do we help a lady cross the street? Why do we pick up a stray cat to make sure it doesn't get run over? Or why do we do these things? It makes you feel good. And so you get something that there's an immediate sort of recompense to you for having done the right thing to begin with. And we hope that a motivator like that can go ahead and increase the number of acts of service that we can provide for each other. General, by the way, we encourage people to go ahead and send in their questions in chat. And as Nikki can tell us, I think we've directed them into the Q&A section, and there already are questions in the Q&A section. But back over to you, sir.
No, I think we have a great question tailor-made for Christine about inspiring teenagers. So Nikki, could you give us that question, please?
Sure. So we have a question from John McGuire about, I'll go ahead and read it out to all of you. I find it extremely difficult to impress the idea of service to my teenager. Do you have any ideas of talking points or potential influences to help? Especially when, you know, you yourself might have a servant's heart and it feels like it comes easy. as I'm sure as it comes easily to many of you on this panel, all of you on this panel. What are your advice for teaching it to people that maybe it doesn't come naturally?
I would say start with your own example, whether it be big or small. We've talked about that it doesn't have to be a huge time commitment or joining a large organization. Using those small examples of being kind to neighbors, helping neighbors with chores, volunteering in the school, showing them that being present brings joy and satisfaction not only to yourself, but those that you're helping. And then continue to have conversations. One of the revelations I've had today was that while we were in the military, those examples and those conversations of service were daily. I mean, daily, everything from what was going on with dad's job, what was going on with our friends, what was going on with our friends' families, with the school, it all really revolved around these very clear ideas of service and going beyond oneself. And as soon as we left the military, those disappeared, and we've had to be very purposeful in continuing with our own volunteerism and our own conversations, because again, they're not seeing these things or these ideas usually in the media or in the TikTok. I doubt there's a lot of examples of volunteerism or service showing up in too many of the TikTok reels that children are watching. And in all honesty, my next recommendation would be to show them something extreme that kind of hits them where they are. Children, especially teens by nature, are very egocentric. They kind of only care about what is going on with them or their friends or their immediate environments. And it takes possibly visiting drug rehab facility, homeless encampments, something extreme to really hit that nerve. Teens especially need something like that spark of inspiration. And it might not happen tomorrow. It probably won't happen tomorrow, but those moments will stick with them, and those conversations will stick with them, and those examples will stick with them as they continue. So I would say don't give up.
That's a great counseling, Christine, for John. Thank you. John, I'll just say I'm not a panelist, but I got to weigh in for just a second. I'm a father of 5 sons, all grown. But my parents, Christine's point about leadership by example, showing them, my parents this time of year, well, they were the youth fellowship counselors at our church, but this time of year, we went on food drives, all the kids, and we loaded these cars with food, and we drove them to Appalachia. I didn't want to go. The houses smell bad. They were depressing, big families. Some of the young people living in cars. You could actually see in these old cars where some of these boys in these families slept in the back seat. That was their bedroom. That's all they had. Sort of like Ty's story, one bed. But over time, I looked forward to going. I wanted to go, and I saw the difference that it made. And I also saw that over the years, did it for 5 years, those families really looked forward and were thankful when enough food probably to get them through November and December, and Thanksgiving and Christmas showed up. And we try to do that with our boys. And Christine's point about taking them to tough places, our second son now has his teenage son and almost teenage daughter and even 7-year-old daughter work with the Special Olympics. And I see how grateful our grandchildren are that they have full use of their body, where their friends who they work with in Special Olympics don't. So I think Christine's 2 points about leadership by example, show them the way, and also encourage them and take them to tough places, but most importantly, have conversations about it. What did we learn about it? What did we see? What is it? What is your takeaway as a teenager? It really brings about empathy. But other comments, Kimmy or Ty, about this question?
Yeah, I love this question. I have 3 teenagers, 4 kids, and 3 of them are teenagers. And I think just starting, take them somewhere tomorrow or this weekend, and it can be the smallest thing. But I remember Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, and he said it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And at that point, it will be like second nature to you, and you will just do it without thinking. And that really resonated with me with the concept of service, because I don't think we need 10,000 hours. I don't think it needs to be that extreme. But I think if we just start doing it, and eventually it won't even feel like service. It'll just be how you react and how you see the world, and and the same will go for your teenager eventually. The more opportunities you give them, and sometimes you might have to cultivate those opportunities based around their interests and ways that they're interested in helping, like Christine said. But the more they do it, the more natural it will become, and the more a part of their character it will be. Even if it seems out of the realm of possibility right now, because they're a teenager and they're interested in self. It really, I do believe that all of those opportunities you give them add up and make them a person who has a servant's heart.
Nikki, let's go ahead, Ty, please.
Okay, yes, sir. I just wanted to add on to here because, you know, I have a son, he's preteen, so he's 11. But what Christine just said and Kimmy said is extremely true. I want to capitalize on one of the things Christine said, which is being present to these events and any of these community fundraisers or events out there. If you go, and this is just me speaking from my experience here with my son, is I take him with me to these events so he can see how many people it affects his small service. So sometimes when they're younger like this, they don't have that long-term vision to wait it out and see how it changes and affects those, you know, maybe a few years down the line or a few months. But if you take them to these events, maybe a 5K, 10K, some type of food drive or whatnot with you, he or she or whatnot can see directly how it affects immediately, and then they can get some type of satisfaction from that. You know, we do that pretty frequently now, and I think it's been helpful. That along with, you know, instilling just hard work for the individual. So when they're young, that's all they can give is compassion and the work ethic.
Thank you for that. Nikki, we have a second question, please.
Yep, and so this was from one of our attendees, and they asked, in what way is service currently conflated with gaining influence and position to gain power rather than civics?
I can talk a little on this, but I don't want to really, the power portion is a little outside of my wheelhouse. I like that terminology Christine used a little earlier, but I think you gain influence through your service by developing that cornerstone of trust with folks. So maybe service side is just trust. If you can develop that type of relationship with somebody, then you do have influence over them and the group. Now, in terms of power, I don't know how that directly translates to power instead of civics, but I do know you can achieve things together toward a shared common objective, mission, or goal, as long as you have these authentic interactions with folks. And it can be done through service that is selfless, and that creates the trust. And people will follow you anywhere if they trust you.
Hi, you're putting a very wonderful positive spin on this question, which has a non-positive connotation in the way I read it. So I wonder if, so I appreciate very much because you put it in the way it should be seen. Those words should be seen in a service culture. But Christine and Kimmy, do you want to take on I think the intent of the question, and that is people misusing service as a chest-pounding, aggrandizing gesture rather than something that actually provides service to others. So the two of you, any comments there, please? Go ahead.
Kim, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think that in our culture and just in life in general, there are always going to be instances where people do things with the wrong intentions and the wrong motives. And I think that is not the way that we should ever set out to serve. And I think unfortunately that is the case sometimes. But I try really hard to focus on my intent and the intent that I want to project, and to teach my family and those around me. And so I think when I just focus on the reasons for service, and kind of not tune out other people's reasons, but just really hone in on my own, then I think that the purest experiences come, the best outcomes, and the most rewarding instances come when you're serving with pure intentions to help the individual, and then like we've all said, you in turn find that yourself has been helped also. But yeah, I that is a good question, and it's hard to put yourself in that situation, because it is common. But yeah, I think it's just something we have to try really hard to avoid, and to check ourselves too, to ask ourselves and intentionally take assessment if we're serving for the right reasons. Something to always pay attention to.
Great, Kimmy. Thank you, Christine.
I would kind of like to echo what Kimmy said about that. We often would need to self-check about why we're choosing to do something. And I would also say that there is an element of just human nature in some of that. And there's kind of a pendulum or a spectrum, right, about why we choose to do things at different points in time. If we're doing it because we need a certain kind of feedback, if we're doing it because we need attention, if we're doing it because we need to check a box. And sometimes all of those are positive, and sometimes all of those could be negative, but it should never be a deterrent for truly trying to empathize or help or serve others. I definitely see it in society today. Again, going back to social media, there's a lot of that self-importance because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, because they are doing good things and they are helping others. They are bringing attention to certain types of ideas or topics, but it's not always presented in the most empathetic and authentic way. And I think that's just something we have to understand happens, and continue, like Kimmy said, to continue to move on and do what we know is right or needed.
It's so important what you all are saying, and that is, don't let a cynical world dissuade you from doing the right thing. Don't say, it's all so bad out there, so I'm just going to tune out and the hell with it. And you're saying, whatever the motivations of others may be, I really want to make a positive difference, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and let the others do whatever they think, whatever their motivations are, and let my motivations and my actions speak for themselves. I think it's a wonderful way you've all expressed this. General?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would say, in my experience, the self-serving servant can oftentimes be turned into selfless by the example of others who embrace them and show them, let's do the right thing for the right reasons in the right way over and over. But there's also the self-serving servant who's inauthentic, and people will eventually call them out, or they will not be sustainable, and they won't be around. They'll check out after they fill up their Facebook or whatever social media account they want to. I'll look at all the things I've done, and then they move on. And those people are inauthentic and found out. I'm reminded often of this hardscrabble kid from Abilene, Kansas, who only way to go to college was to go to a service academy, and this lightweight that no one ever heard of named Dwight David Eisenhower. And he is quoted often as saying, it is amazing what a man can do, or what a person can do, if they don't care who gets the credit. And I think that those selfless servants who serve a cause greater than self, who don't care about credit, are who really shines in the moment. Not that you're looking for shine, but you can really see the well-intended heart, and we should hold those people up. And the self-serving servant, not even a servant, but the self-serving volunteer should and must be called out, in my opinion. We want to thank you all for today, our audience, for joining us, for our wonderful panelists, better than we paid for. You guys were great. They were volunteers, by the way. And thank you for answering the questions. We ask why we serve, and you all answered it brilliantly. And it really is about others. It's about giving to others. We're so fortunate in our country to be the recipients of these gifts that all those who went before us have provided to us. And it's our turn to give back and pay it forward. Thank you all so much, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you all very much. It's been inspirational to me to listen to you. And I'm proud to be part of a broad ASU family that produces and has people like you in it. It's been a real honor, and thank you very much for being with us today. Have a great afternoon. All the best to all of you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.